The message came on a Tuesday, not through any radio signal, not through any satellite feed, and not through any system that humanity had built. It came directly into every screen on Earth at the same time. Every phone, every television, every computer monitor, every digital billboard in Times Square, in Tokyo, in Lagos, and Mumbai. All of them went dark for exactly 3 seconds, and then the same image appeared. A cold blue symbol, rotating slowly, surrounded by text in a language no human had ever seen before. But below it, translated into every major language on Earth simultaneously, were 9 words. Asterisk, your species has been assessed. Relocation or termination will proceed. Asterisk, that was it. No sender, no return signal, no coordinates. Just those 9 words and the symbol, and then every screen went back to normal, as if nothing had happened. The world did not take it well. Governments called emergency sessions within the hour. Military satellites were redirected. Every space monitoring agency on the planet began scanning frequencies they had never bothered to scan before. The United Nations building in New York was so packed with delegates and their staff that people were standing in the hallways. Within 6 hours, a joint statement was prepared, translated, and broadcast into space on every frequency humanity could manage. It said, in simple terms, asterisk, we received your message. Please clarify your intentions. We wish to communicate. Asterisk, there was no reply for 11 days. Then the ships appeared. They did not come from deep space, which was the first surprise. They came from behind the moon, as if they had been sitting there quietly for a long time, watching, waiting for the right moment. 17 vessels, each one roughly the size of a small city, arranged in a perfect formation that slowly moved into a high orbit above Earth. They were dark gray, almost black, and covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift slightly depending on the angle of the light. No engines were visible, no exhaust. They simply moved, as if the laws of physics were more of a suggestion to them than a rule. Every military on Earth went to its highest alert status simultaneously. And then one of the ships opened a communication channel, and a voice came through, calm, flat, neither male nor female, speaking perfect English with no accent at all. We are the Veil Accord. This system has been cataloged for resource extraction and spatial reallocation. The third planet carries biological life of Grade 4 classification. Under Accord law, Grade 4 species are offered a single choice: accept relocation to a designated reserve world, or face standard termination procedure. You have 30 of your days to respond with a collective decision. Failure to respond will be interpreted as refusal, and termination will proceed on schedule. The channel closed. For about 10 seconds, every military commander, every head of state, every diplomat who had been listening to that transmission said absolutely nothing. Then everyone started talking at once. Commander Yara Osei of the African Union Defense Council was the first senior military officer to put something in writing that cut through all the noise. She was not the highest-ranked person in any room that day, and she was not the loudest voice. But she had spent 22 years in military intelligence, and she had a habit of writing short, blunt memos that made people uncomfortable because they were usually right. Her memo, sent simultaneously to 17 defense councils across the planet, was 4 sentences long. Asterisk, they gave us 30 days and 2 options. Both options end with us losing Earth. We have not been given a negotiation. We have been given a procedure. Asterisk, it spread through every major government inbox within the hour. The debate that followed was enormous and messy and, at times, terrifying to watch. There were serious voices, intelligent, educated, experienced voices, arguing that humanity should accept relocation. The Veil Accord clearly possessed technology so far beyond anything Earth had that resistance was not just unlikely to succeed, it was essentially suicidal. 17 city-sized ships had appeared from behind the moon without being detected by a single instrument. Whatever engines they used left no trace. Whatever weapons they carried had not been demonstrated yet, but the implication was obvious. A species that could move city-sized ships silently through space and translate every human language simultaneously was not a species that humanity could fight with aircraft carriers and missile systems. The relocation camp, and it was a large camp, argued that survival was survival. A reserve world, wherever it was better than extinction. Humanity would endure. Humanity would eventually grow, adapt, find a way to return to the stars on its own terms. The Veil Accord had offered a choice, and between the two choices, only one of them kept the species alive. Yara Osei did not disagree with the logic. She disagreed with the premise. She presented her counter-argument in a session of the newly formed Emergency Planetary Council, a body that had not existed a week ago and was already the most powerful decision-making group in human history. She stood at a table surrounded by 41 representatives from every major nation and bloc on Earth, and she spoke for 11 minutes without notes. She pointed out three things. First, the Veil Accord had given humanity 30 days. That was not the behavior of a species that could simply end them at will. Something that could casually destroy a planet did not offer deadlines. Deadlines implied process. Process implied that there were rules the Accord itself was bound by. This was leverage, and humanity had not yet figured out how to use it. Second, the phrase Grade 4 classification was interesting. It implied a grading system, which implied there were Grade 5s and 6s and possibly higher. The Accord had assessed humanity and placed them at Grade 4. The question was, what did higher grades get? Different treatment? Rights? Protections under Accord law? If there was a law, there was a legal structure. If there was a legal structure, there were arguments to be made within it. Third, and most importantly, the ships had not fired. 17 vessels capable of, presumably, ending all life on Earth had been sitting in orbit for nearly 2 weeks. They had talked. They were waiting. Whatever the Accord was, it was not purely a force of destruction. It operated within a framework. That framework was the most important thing humanity had ever needed to understand, and they had 23 days left to understand it. The room was quiet for a long moment after she finished. Then the representative from Brazil, a retired admiral named Costa, leaned forward and asked the question everyone was thinking. You're suggesting we don't accept relocation. You're also suggesting we don't simply refuse and wait to be destroyed. What exactly are you suggesting? Yara looked at him steadily. I'm suggesting we do something the Accord clearly did not expect from a Grade 4 species, she said. I'm suggesting we lawyer up. And while we do that, we build. The building started that same night. Not because anyone had a plan yet. Not because humanity had any real idea how to fight 17 ships that had come from behind the moon without being seen. But because Yara's memo had already gone everywhere, and the part that stuck in every military mind on the planet was simple. Asterisk, we have not been given a negotiation. We have been given a procedure. Asterisk, and humans, as a species, had a long and complicated history of refusing to follow procedures they had not agreed to. Every major shipyard on Earth and in orbital space went to continuous operation. The 3 existing military space stations were put on full war footing. Every nation that had any kind of space program, large or small, advanced or barely functional, received a direct communication from the Emergency Planetary Council asking one question. What can you contribute? The answers came back fast. Faster than anyone expected. Because it turned out that when you told 8 billion people that their planet had been scheduled for destruction and gave them 23 days to do something about it, the general response was not panic. The general response was anger. Deep, cold, very focused anger. And humanity, when it was angry and focused and working together, was something that the Veil Accord had apparently never thought to account for. Up in their city-sized ships, dark and silent above the blue curve of the Earth, the Accord waited for their deadline to pass. Below them, the entire planet had just shifted into a gear it had never used before. The 30 days were not going to end the way the Accord had planned. The Veil Accord made their first mistake on day 9. One of their ships, smaller than the others, though still roughly the size of a large airport, descended to an altitude of 40 kilometers above the North Atlantic and began what the Accord later described as a routine geological survey. No warning was given. No communication was sent. The ship simply moved, and the instruments it deployed sent pulses deep into the ocean floor that registered on every seismic monitoring station from Iceland to Portugal. 3 NATO fighter jets were scrambled and reached the ship's altitude within minutes. They did not fire. They had orders not to fire. They simply flew alongside the massive vessel, close enough that their pilots could see the shifting geometric patterns on its hull, and they broadcast on the open channel that had been used before. Asterisk, this action was not communicated in advance. Please clarify your purpose. The Accord ship did not respond. It completed its survey and rose back to orbital altitude without a word. That evening, Yara Osei sat in the Emergency Planetary Council chamber and placed a single photograph on the table. It was taken from one of the fighter jets, a shot of the hull up close, showing one of the geometric patterns in detail. Around the edge of the pattern, barely visible, was what appeared to be text. Not translated, not addressed to anyone, just there, as if it was a label on the side of a machine. One of the council's linguists had been working on the Accord's written language since the first message appeared on every screen. She was a small, intense woman named Dr. Priya Anand who had not slept more than 4 hours in 9 days. She looked at the photograph for a long time. Then she said, quietly, "That's a designation. It says something like Class 3 Extraction Pre-Survey Unit. It's a mining ship." The room absorbed that. Then Admiral Costa, who had been skeptical of Yara's strategy from the start, sat back in his chair and said nothing for a full minute. When he spoke, his voice was flat and careful. "They're not waiting for our answer," he said. "They're already preparing." Yara nodded once. They were never really waiting. The 30 days was never a negotiation window. It's a processing window, a formality in their system. They catalog, they survey, they prepare, and then they act. The choice they offered us, relocation or termination, is not a real choice. It's a form, something they fill out before they do what they were always going to do. The room was very still. "Then nothing we say legally matters," said the representative from Japan. "Nothing we say through their framework," Yara replied. "But we are not operating inside their framework anymore. We stopped the moment we decided not to simply comply." She pulled up the latest numbers on the screen behind her. In 9 days, the combined output of every shipyard on Earth and in orbit had produced results that even she had not fully expected. 3 new military frigates, built to modified deep space specifications, had been completed at the orbital yards above Kazakhstan, Brazil, and the Joint Pacific Station. They were not large ships. They were not anywhere close to matching what the Accord had in orbit. But they existed, and they were armed, and they were crewed by people who had volunteered to be there knowing exactly what they were volunteering for. 42 more vessels were under construction. The rate was accelerating daily because every nation had stripped its non-essential manufacturing to feed the effort. Factories that made agricultural equipment were making hull plates. Universities had suspended regular classes and turned their physics and engineering departments into full-time problem-solving operations. 3 independent research teams had already made significant breakthroughs in understanding the energy signatures the Accord ships produced. Not enough to replicate them, but enough to start building countermeasures. The Accord, for their part, seemed utterly unconcerned. Contact came from an unexpected direction on day 14. A signal, faint and heavily encoded, was received by the Deep Space Array in the Atacama Desert. It was not from the Accord ships. It was coming from much farther away, from somewhere beyond the outer planets, on a trajectory that suggested it had been traveling for a long time. Dr. Anand's team worked on it for 6 hours and came back with a partial translation. The signal was from another species. Their name, as best as could be understood, translated roughly as the Thari. The message was short and clearly written in a hurry, as if whoever sent it was worried about being detected. The core of it, stripped of the parts that could not yet be translated, said something like, "We also received the procedure. We also refused. We are watching. You are not alone in the pattern. There are others who refused before you. Learn this. The Accord operates under the Galactic Compact. The Compact has rules. Rules can be invoked. A species must reach grade 6 to invoke them independently, but a grade 6 sponsor can invoke on your behalf. Find a sponsor. Do not fight without one. Fighting without a compact standing is destruction. Fighting with one is a hearing." The signal ended there. Dr. Anand stood in front of the council, looking like someone who had just opened a door and found an entirely different world behind it. "There's a legal system," she said, her voice strange with the weight of the idea. "There is an actual galactic legal system, and apparently, we have the right to use it, if we can find someone to stand for us." Yara looked at the partial translation for a long time. "A grade 6 species," she said. "What does that even mean?" "It means older, more advanced, more established within the compact framework." Dr. Anand pulled up the breakdown of the translation. "The Thari, whoever they are, They're suggesting we're not the first species the Accord has done this to. And at least some of those species survived by finding a sponsor and demanding a hearing under compact rules. The Accord can't simply ignore a compact proceeding. It would expose them to sanctions from every other member species. Admiral Costa leaned forward. So we need to find a grade 6 alien civilization, convince them to legally sponsor a species they've never met, and file some kind of interstellar legal claim in 14 days. 11, Yara said quietly. A long silence. Then, to his credit, Costa let out a short, exhausted laugh. Right. 11. The search for a sponsor ran in parallel with everything else, because stopping anything else was not an option. The war fleet, and that was what it was now, openly called that, no softer language, continued to grow. 42 ships became 60, then 78. They were not all the same. Some were built for speed. Some were built to carry weapons that were, by any prior human standard, almost absurdly large. Some were built specifically as communications and intelligence vessels, bristling with sensor equipment and crewed almost entirely by scientists and linguists. The Accord noticed the construction. Of course they did. On day 16, the same flat, genderless voice came through the open channel again. We observe that your species is engaged in military production. This is noted in your file. It does not change the procedure. It may, however, affect the terms of your relocation offer. Aggression by a grade 4 species toward Accord representatives is classified as a compliance failure and removes the relocation option from consideration. Yara was the one who responded. She had been waiting for exactly this moment. She sat in front of the broadcast equipment in the council chamber, straightened her jacket, and spoke in a calm, clear voice. We are aware of the Galactic Compact, she said. We are aware that the Compact has rules governing the treatment of biological species within catalog systems. We are formally invoking our right to request a Compact review of this procedure. We are also formally requesting contact with any Compact member species willing to act as sponsor for our petition. This message is being broadcast on all available frequencies. We are not complying with the procedure. We are exercising our rights within the framework that your own legal structure provides. She paused for exactly 2 seconds. We will not be relocated. We will not accept termination. And we are done being spoken to like a form to be processed. She ended the broadcast. For a moment, the room was absolutely silent. Then, one by one, the people around her began to applaud. Not in a theatrical way. Quietly, seriously, the way people applaud when something has been said that cannot be unsaid. Up in orbit, the Accord ships did not move. But 11 minutes after Yara's broadcast, a new signal came in. Not from the Thari. From somewhere much closer, somewhere in the asteroid belt, where nothing was supposed to be. A calm, deep voice, speaking in accented but clear English. This is the Solen continuance. We have been in your system for some time, observing quietly. We are grade 7. We heard your broadcast. A pause. We find your species. Interesting. Tell us more about this refusal of yours. We are listening. Yara closed her eyes for just a moment. Then she opened them, pulled her notes together, and began to speak. 11 days left. A possible sponsor on the line. A war fleet growing in orbit. And for the first time since a Tuesday 3 weeks ago, the situation was something other than impossible. It was merely very, very difficult. Humanity had always done well with very, very difficult. The Solen continuance sent a single small vessel to meet humanity's delegation. It arrived at the orbital station above Brazil without any drama. No flash of light, no shockwave, no sound. One moment the docking corridor sensor showed empty space, and the next it showed a ship roughly the size of a bus, matte silver, perfectly smooth, attached to the station's external dock as if it had always been there. The pilot, if there was one, never showed itself. Instead, a door opened, and a single figure walked out into the station's corridor. It was tall, nearly 3 meters. Its body structure was broadly humanoid. 2 legs, 2 arms, 1 head, but everything was proportioned differently, longer and thinner than a human frame, covered in what appeared to be overlapping plates of something between skin and shell, a pale amber color. Its face had 2 large eyes that were of very dark gold, no visible nose, and a mouth that moved slightly even when it was not speaking, as if it was processing language continuously. It wore no visible equipment except a band around its left wrist that pulsed faintly with light. It looked at the small human reception group, Yara, Dr. Anand, Admiral Costa, and 3 junior staff who were trying very hard not to stare, and spoke in that same calm, deep voice from the broadcast. I am called Saren 4 within your phonetic range. I represent the Solen continuance in this preliminary assessment. We do not commit to sponsorship lightly. It is a significant legal act under the compact, and we have standing to protect. It paused. We will ask questions. You will answer them completely and honestly. We will evaluate. You have time, but not unlimited time. Yara nodded once. Understood. Ask anything you need. Saren 4 looked at her for a long moment with those dark gold eyes. We will begin with the simplest question. Why do you refuse? Yara had expected technical questions, legal arguments, demonstrations of military capacity. She had prepared extensively for those. This one was different, and she answered it without preparation, which was perhaps why the answer came out so cleanly. Because this is our home, she said. Not a resource, not a space to be reallocated. Ours. We were born here. Everything we have ever built, everyone we have ever loved, every idea we have ever had, it came from this planet. The Accord didn't ask if it was occupied before they scheduled it. They surveyed it, gave it a number, and issued a form. We're refusing because we refuse to be a form. Saren 4 said nothing for a few seconds. The band on its wrist pulsed 3 times. That answer, it said slowly, is more sophisticated than we expected from a grade 4 species. Costa could not entirely stop himself. What were you expecting? Fear? Bargaining? Offers of resources or territory in exchange for mercy? Saren 4 turned those gold eyes on him. We have observed many species receive the procedure. Most negotiate from a position of terror. Some simply comply. A small number refuse. But their refusal is usually emotional, rage, desperation. You are the first grade 4 species we have encountered that opened its refusal with a legal invocation and a philosophical statement in the same broadcast. Another pause. It is why we announced ourselves. The assessment lasted 4 days. Saren 4 moved through the station, the orbital yards, and eventually the surface of Earth with a quiet, methodical thoroughness that was somehow more unsettling than hostility would have been. It asked questions about everything. About human history. All of it, including the wars, the genocides, the times humanity had turned on itself with enormous efficiency. It did not seem troubled by these. It seemed, if anything, more interested because of them. It asked about human art. It spent an entire morning in a music library, listening, saying nothing. It asked about human disagreement, how humans argued, how they reached decisions, how they had built the Emergency Planetary Council in less than 2 weeks from nothing and given it real authority over military production when historically every nation protected its own interests above everything else. You should not have been able to do that, Saren 4 said, at one point, looking at the production numbers from the shipyards. Coordinated planetary-scale military production across competing political entities with no prior framework. The Accord assessed your species as grade 4 in part because your political fragmentation was judged to be a permanent structural weakness. Grade 4 classification assumes an inability to achieve rapid unified action. Dr. Anand looked up from her translation notes. They graded us based on the assumption that we couldn't cooperate. Yes. And they were wrong. Yes, Saren 4 said. They were wrong. It was quiet for a moment. Then it added, this happens occasionally. The Accord's assessment methodology was designed for species with simpler social structures. Species that are more homogeneous. You are not homogeneous. You are. Fractious is the closest translation, but your fractiousness appears to produce a specific type of response under existential pressure that their models do not account for. Costa looked at Yara. Yara looked at the production numbers. Then she looked back at Saren 4. Will you sponsor us? She asked. We are still evaluating, Saren 4 said. On day 23, with 7 days left on the Accord's deadline, 2 things happened almost simultaneously. The first, Saren 4 called the full council together, stood at the head of the table, and delivered its assessment. The Solen Continuance will act as sponsor for humanity's petition to the Galactic Compact. This carries significant weight. We are grade 7 and have been compact members for longer than your species has had written language. Our sponsorship means the Accord cannot proceed with the procedure until a compact review panel has convened and ruled. It also means they cannot retaliate against you during the review period without triggering compact sanctions that would damage their trade relationships with 43 other member species. Saren 4 paused. However, our sponsorship is not unconditional. We are staking our legal reputation on the argument that humanity meets the threshold for compact protection. That threshold requires us to demonstrate that you are a species of sufficient complexity, cultural depth, and developmental potential to warrant full protected status. If the panel rules against us, we lose standing. That matters to us. The room was very quiet. We believe the argument can be made, Saren 4 continued. But the Accord will contest it. They will argue that your grade classification is accurate, that you are a simple species, and that your recent actions are anomalous behavior driven by survival pressure rather than genuine sophistication. You will need to be part of the hearing. You will need to speak for yourselves. Yara leaned forward. We can do that. We know, Saren 4 said. And for the first time, something in its expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but something adjacent to approval. That is why we said yes. The second thing that happened on day 23 was less welcome. The Accord fleet moved. Not toward Earth, not yet. But the 17 ships reorganized their formation, shifting from a loose, orbital pattern into something tighter, more deliberate. 3 of the smaller vessels broke away and took up positions at the L4 and L5 Lagrange points. Positions that, as every military analyst immediately recognized, would allow them to cut off Earth's approach and departure corridors. It was not an attack. It was preparation. It was the Accord tightening its grip while still technically observing the deadline. It was also, Yara noted in a memo sent to every fleet commander that evening, a mistake. Because the Accord had just moved 3 of their ships away from the main formation. And humanity's fleet, now 112 vessels, had been sitting in various orbital and lunar positions, engines warm, waiting. Not to fight. Not yet. The legal process had to run first. But the Accord had just demonstrated, clearly, that they were not going to simply hold position while a compact review took place. They were going to continue preparing, which meant humanity needed to be ready to do more than talk. That evening, Yara held a command briefing with every fleet captain, in person or by secure link. She stood at the front of the room with a star map behind her showing the positions of every known ship, human and Accord, in the inner system. The legal process is real and we are pursuing it, she said. Saren 4 and the Solin continuance are genuine allies, and what they're doing for us is significant. But I want every one of you to understand something clearly. She let the silence sit for a moment. We are not going to win this because someone else fights for us in a courtroom. We are going to win this because when the Accord looks at what we've built in 23 days, they understand that destroying us is not free. It has never been free. And the more it costs them, the stronger our legal argument becomes. She looked around the room. We are the evidence. This fleet is the argument. Every ship we launch is a sentence in the case Saren 4 is making on our behalf. Nobody spoke, but the captains in that room, one by one, straightened in their seats. 7 days left on the deadline. A legal hearing pending. A war fleet ready. And 17 Accord ships that had, until very recently, assumed the outcome of this was already decided. They were about to learn something important about Grade 4 species who had decided they were done being processed. The compact hearing convened on day 29. It did not happen in person. It happened across a communication network that Saren 4 explained was older than most of the civilizations currently using it. A relay system built by a species that no longer existed, maintained now by the compact itself as neutral infrastructure. Every member species of the Galactic Compact could observe. Many did. Saren 4 estimated that the audience, in terms of total civilizations watching, was somewhere in the hundreds. Yara sat in a chair in the orbital station's main communication room with a headset on and Dr. Anand at her side, with a translation feed running. Behind her, on screens arranged along the wall, she could see feeds from the fleet, 119 ships now, the newest ones barely 48 hours out of the yards, their hull paint still curing in the vacuum. She had asked for those feeds specifically, not because she could command from this room, but because she wanted the fleet in her line of sight while she talked. The Accord's representative in the hearing was a voice. Just a voice, the same flat, toneless one that had delivered the original procedure. It did not give a name. In the compact framework, apparently, the Accord spoke as a single institutional entity rather than as individuals. Sarin IV had explained this was common among older, larger civilizations that had moved past individual identity at the institutional level. Humanity found it unsettling. Yara had decided to use that feeling rather than fight it. The presiding voice of the panel introduced itself as the keeper of record for the 7th compact session and stated the question before the panel in precise terms. Does the species designated as humanity, occupying the 3rd planet of the Sol system, meet the threshold for protected status under Article 14 of the Galactic Compact? And if so, does the Veil Accord's filed procedure against said species constitute a violation of that article? The Accord went first. Its argument was thorough, cold, and delivered with absolute confidence. Humanity was Grade 4 by every standard metric. Grade 4 species lacked interstellar travel, lacked compact awareness, lacked demonstrated capacity for unified civilizational decision-making. The Accord's own assessment logs, filed before the procedure began, documented a species divided into hundreds of competing political units with a long history of internal conflict. The recent military production and legal invocation, the Accord argued, were anomalous behaviors produced by existential pressure, the equivalent of a cornered animal making surprising movements. It did not change the underlying classification. The procedure was legal, properly filed, and should proceed. It was a strong argument. Yara listened to it without expression. Then Sarin IV spoke for the Solen continuance. It did not argue with the Accord's metrics. It argued with the Accord's interpretation of them. Grade 4 classification, it pointed out, was based on a set of criteria designed to evaluate species on a linear development scale, a scale built, largely, by the Accord itself over many thousands of years. That scale assumed that complexity and cooperation were things a species developed gradually, over long periods, and that a species with high internal conflict was a species with low cooperative potential. Humanity, Sarin IV argued, was a direct disproof of that model. It presented a timeline. In 23 days, 23, a species with no prior unified governance structure, no existing framework for planetary-scale military cooperation, and no knowledge of the compact or interstellar politics had done the following: formed a functioning planetary council with genuine authority, coordinated military-industrial production across every major nation simultaneously, established contact with 2 separate alien species through original linguistic analysis, invoked compact law they had learned about 11 days prior, and secured a Grade 7 sponsor, something that, Sarin IV noted carefully, no Grade 4 species had ever previously achieved. The Accord's model predicts this is impossible, Sarin IV said, and yet it happened. When a model predicts impossibility and reality produces the thing anyway, the correct response is not to dismiss reality. The correct response is to examine the model. The panel's keeper of record asked a question. Is the Solen continuance's position that humanity's classification should be formally revised? Our position, Sarin IV said, is that humanity's classification is irrelevant to the question of protection. Article 14 does not specify a grade threshold. It specifies a complexity threshold. The question is not what grade humanity has been assigned. The question is whether they are a species of sufficient depth and potential to warrant the compact's protection. We submit that the last 23 days are an answer to that question that speaks for itself. Then Sarin IV said something unexpected. We asked that the keeper permit the human representative to address the panel directly. A pause. Then, this is unusual. Yes, Sarin IV agreed. Humanity is unusual. That is, in part, the argument. Yara did not prepare a speech. She had thought about preparing one, and then she had decided that a prepared speech was exactly the wrong approach for this moment. The Accord had already made its argument with perfect, polished logic. Matching that logic on its own terms was not the point. She spoke for about 7 minutes. She talked about Earth. She described it in simple terms. The way the light looked over the ocean at sunrise, the way cities sounded at night, the texture of life on a planet where 8 billion people had built, over many thousands of years, something enormous and messy and alive. She talked about what it meant to belong to a place. Not to own it, not to claim it as territory, but to be from it, to have your identity, your history, your entire understanding of what existence meant wrapped up in a specific piece of ground under a specific star. She said, the Accord looked at our planet and saw a resource. We look at it and see a home. I don't think the Accord is wrong. Exactly. It is a resource. It contains minerals and water and energy that can be extracted. But it is also the only place in the universe where the specific thing that we are exists. And what we are took billions of years to develop. Long before we had language or tools or any of the things your metrics measure, something was happening on that planet that is not happening anywhere else. You can take the minerals from 1,000 other rocks. You cannot take what we are from anywhere except there. She paused. We are not asking to be left alone forever. We are asking for the chance to grow into whatever we are capable of becoming. We invoked your law because we believed it was made for exactly this situation, to protect the irreplaceable from being processed as if it were merely convenient material. If we are wrong about what your law means, tell us. But if we are right, then protect us. That is what the law is for. She stopped talking. The silence on the channel lasted long enough that Dr. Anand quietly touched her arm. Yara shook her head once. She was not nervous. She was done. The keeper of records spoke after 4 minutes of deliberation, which Saren 4 later said was extraordinarily fast for a compact panel. The panel finds that humanity of the Sol system meets the complexity threshold for protected status under Article 14 of the Galactic Compact. The Veil Accord's filed procedure is hereby suspended pending full classification review. The Accord is ordered to withdraw its vessels from the Sol system within 72 hours, as required under compact enforcement protocols. Failure to comply will result in trade sanctions under Article 22. There was more procedural language, filing requirements, a schedule for the formal review. Yara stopped hearing it after the first sentence. Dr. Anand had her face in her hands. Costa, watching from a screen on the wall, said nothing. He just nodded slowly, the way someone nods when something has happened that they are going to need a long time to fully understand. The Accord ships left. They did not do it gracefully. There was no communication, no acknowledgement, no concession of any kind. On day 31, the 17 vessels simply began to move, and over the course of about 9 hours, they rose out of Earth's orbital space and accelerated away on a heading that took them back toward wherever they had come from. Humanity watched them go. The war fleet, 119 ships, built in less than a month, held formation in low orbit as the Accord vessels passed. Not aggressively, not triumphantly. They simply held position, engines on standby, present and visible, a reminder that the question of fighting had been on the table even if the table had been put away for now. Saren 4 departed 2 days later. Before leaving, it met privately with Yara one last time in the orbital station. The review will take time, it said. Years, possibly. The formal reclassification process is slow. The Accord will challenge it at every stage. You should expect them to return eventually, not with a procedure, but with lawyers of their own and political pressure through the compact. We'll be ready, Yara said. Yes. Those dark gold eyes held her gaze. That is what we expect. That is, in fact, what the continuance is counting on. A pause. You should know, the very species that sent you the signal. They have requested that their case be reopened, citing your hearing as precedent. 2 other species in similar situations have filed their own petitions this week. Your case has already changed things. Yara was quiet for a moment. We didn't plan for that. No, Saren 4 said. You rarely plan for the large things. You simply do the immediate thing completely, and the large things follow. It moved toward the airlock. That is also unusual for a grade 4 species. Yara almost smiled. We keep hearing that. Saren 4 paused at the door. You will not always be grade 4. And then it was gone. Yara stood at the viewport for a long time after the Selene vessel detached. Below her, through the curvature of the station's observation window, Earth turned slowly in its familiar way, blue and white and green and brown, the same as it had always been, the same as it would continue to be. The fleet was still up here. It was not going anywhere. If anything, it would grow, because this was not over, and everyone knew it, and the lesson of the last 30 days was not that humanity had been saved by finding the right words or the right allies. The lesson was simpler than that. The Accord had looked at Earth and seen something to be processed. They had assumed that a species this divided, this fractious, This young and messy and loud could not organize fast enough or think clearly enough or argue well enough to change the outcome of a procedure that had probably been followed 1,000 times before. They had been wrong, and the compact had noticed. The Thari had noticed. 2 other species had noticed. Whatever humanity was, whatever specific, strange, stubborn, infuriating thing lived on that blue planet, it had just introduced itself to the galaxy, not as a resource, not as a grade 4 species to be relocated or terminated, as something the galaxy was going to have to learn to deal with, on equal terms, for a very long time to come. Below the fleet, below the station, below the thin bright line where atmosphere met space, 8 billion people went about their lives. Most of them did not know exactly what had been said in a hearing room that spanned light years. Most of them would not read the legal documents. Most of them would never know the specific words that Saren 4 had spoken to a compact panel, or what Yara had said in those 7 quiet minutes that had apparently moved a panel of ancient civilizations to rule in humanity's favor in 4 minutes flat. They just knew that the ships in the sky had left. And that was enough for today. Tomorrow, humanity would do what it had always done. It would keep building.